technical difficulties, but we are ready. I'm joined by Mr. Andrew Marchand, who covers the sports media business for the New York Post. Mr. Marchand, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Greatly appreciate it. Greatly appreciate it. No, I got you for a limited time. A few things I want to get into. Recently, I was fortunate to have the great Skip Bayless on my podcast. And getting ready for the interview, I read a lot of your articles, especially as it was pertaining to his new deal. One thing that stood out to me, ESPN, in an attempt to woo him from Fox Sports, was willing to consider having Skip on Fox in the morning and then coming to do some ESPN programming in the afternoon. Now, I know Skip is a one-of-one talent, but Mr. Marchand, that reeked of desperation by ESPN. What did you think when you first learned that the worldwide leader was actually considering this?
Well, I'd say this. They wanted to put him on ESPN Plus with Stephen A. Of course, those two for years were on First Take together. And if you look at both of their rise in their career, I think it's really kind of coincided a lot with being together. There's other things they both have done, so it's not only that, of course. But so I think ESPN is trying to get as many people to their subscription platform as possible. And they thought, you know what, that could work, even if Skip was on in the morning on Fox and Stephen A is in the morning on ESPN. Then they unite in the afternoon on Plus. Yeah, it's one of those things when it didn't happen, you're like, yeah, I could see why it didn't happen. But it came pretty close.
That was crazy, man, to even consider that. Let's talk about First Take, because it's kind of in a transition period. Recently, Stephen A has been making the rounds on the Breakfast Club and Hot 97, talking about, he was honest about, he wanted Max Kellerman removed. But one thing that stood out to me, he keeps saying that they were number one for the last 5 years. I don't think he's lying. I'm sure he's referring to television ratings. But Mr. Marchand, in 2021, when millennials are cutting the cord and watching things on YouTube, was First Take number one in the hearts and minds? And when it comes to impact, is there a different metric the industry is using to determine who is actually leading the way?
Yeah, I'm not sure what Stephen A's referring to when he says they're number one. I don't know. He doesn't say number one in ratings. I don't know. Maybe that they're beating Fox Sports 1. That's kind of, I guess, their competition. They're definitely not the number one rated morning show among all television shows. But it does well. It makes money for ESPN, even with Stephen A making so much like he does. So I don't know what he's referring to exactly. I think First Take has some social currency. I mean, if you look at Twitter on an average morning, which I recommend not doing that. But if you happen to go on Twitter, it does a lot of times the conversation has to do with that. And ESPN still has great weight. We can talk about everything else and it being diminished in some regards in terms of importance. It's still the most important platform in terms of sports, at least for the time being. So it has weight. I mean, if it's number one, I'm not, like you said, I'm not exactly sure what that means when Stephen A says that, but it does well. There's no doubt about that.
With these debate shows, speaking of Twitter, I know sometimes people think, oh, they're orchestrated. They're kind of doctored up. They manufacture arguments. I don't believe that. And I think the key to that is picking people from different sides of the tracks. You look at some of the best shows, pardon the interruption, that's Tony Kornheiser, a white Jewish man from Long Island, and then you have Mike Wilbon, who's a black man from the South Side of Chicago. Undisputed, Hall of Fame tight end from Atlanta, Georgia, Shannon Sharp, and Skip Bayless, a white male from Oklahoma. So when I look at First Take, and they have this carousel of Keyshawn and who's the other guy? Michael Irvin.
Yep.
I don't think that could work. Like, I think they got to go get a white guy. So as you look around the industry, like, who you think would be the front runner to sit us across from Stephen A. Smith?
Well, let me ask you this. So I don't know about that. Like, I don't know if, like, race, I feel like, I mean, this is like a larger discussion about our country. Like, everything is race. Like, I don't think they necessarily need, I don't know if, like, the color of someone's skin in that respect matters as much as if it's entertaining or not. Like, if like, look, they brought in Michael Irvin on Mondays, and they have Tim Tebow on Fridays. I mean, if you said to me long term, who would I say could be Stephen A's everyday sparring partner? I'd go Marcus Spears. I just think he's got that TV presence, that it kind of works, right? It's not only about what you say, but how you say it. Spears has that great voice, and just also it's like the facial expression. So there's more to it. But yeah, like I think if you look at combinations, there is a lot of times a yin and yang.
Right.
If you look at Wilbon and Kornheiser, why have they been so successful for so long? And I think the biggest thing that really has made them have such a long run is because before they even ever went on TV, they'd been arguing for 20 years in the Washington Post newsroom and at events. And so when you have that chemistry with somebody, that's what really, to me, comes across on TV. And to get back to my original point, I do think Spears and Stephen A have that. Would it be too much every day? Maybe, but I think they have it when they're on together.
Okay. For the record, I'm not just like race baiting. I agree with you. I think they look for differences, and sometimes I think that just falls along racial lines.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, listen, there does seem to be a formula of what these, and then there's a woman who's the moderator. I mean, that's what they've been doing. I mean, that's it's not, you're just calling what you're seeing and you're not incorrect. I mean, those are just facts of how these shows are set up by these executives, predominantly. And so, but I don't know if it's needed, I guess would be my point. I don't know if, I don't know. I just think you tune in if the show is entertaining, and I don't know if, I mean, maybe some people are looking at that, but I don't know I think if the show's entertaining enough, these shows aren't really informative in my opinion. There's some information, but they're really entertainment shows in my opinion.
I'm going to just throw a name out there. It's got to be somebody that knows basketball and football. I'm just throwing a name. I don't know anything. Alan Hahn. That's who I think may have a shot. Let's talk about this man in broadcast. The simulcast on Monday night. Peyton Manning and Eli are doing their own version of Monday Night Football. I don't like it, and I anticipated that it would be bad because I feel Peyton Manning is someone who likes to control things. That was his story as a player. He could get to the line of scrimmage and he can control and anticipate things before they happen. You can't do that in live TV. You got to be able to react. So I'm not a big fan. What do you make of their first 2 weeks doing the program?
So I think you're right in their first 5 minutes of the show where Peyton was at the whiteboard doing they're not showing the field and he's at the whiteboard. I thought that was too much. Like you said, planned. The thing with the helmet, planned, and he's calling out the plays, planned. I agree with you. But I do think they audibled well. And I think Peyton's able to do it. I mean, he trusts himself enough. Like if you compare him to someone like A-Rod, who when he does game broadcasts, he doesn't trust himself enough just in general to be able to be off the cuff and be able to react. And I think Peyton can do that. I think what you're pointing to and the analogy you're making is an accurate one, but I think that he's shown that he can just go and talk about everything and have the ability to be off the cuff because he does have so much knowledge. I mean, these guys, the level, when you get to that level, having covered some of these big time athletes, especially in baseball for me, there's the physical. Of course you need the physical, but it's really the mental that really separates guys and gals at that level because it's just, I don't know. I was just talking to somebody. I don't know if Peyton's happy, right? I hope he's happy, but I don't know if he's happy because he just kind of has that insatiable, has to be perfect, which I do think is a difficult, you could probably already tell I'm very imperfect. So I mean, it's easier to be happy. And so Peyton, I think that is something you're right, especially on live TV. You can't be perfect. It's not that type of medium when you're live.
You can't be perfect. And I think it's someone who's very conscious of their image and their presentation to the world. I think he at times is afraid to be vulnerable. And that's why I think he turned down the Monday night gig multiple times. Like he had a chance to be the play-by-play commentator and he turned it down. What do we know about why he chose to not accept that gig? Because you can't hide in that booth by yourself. You can't call upon your celebrity friends to help you if you're drowning in that booth.
Yeah, I mean, look, he could have done that, and I think he's shown that he would be good. He sees the game really well. The forum is different when you have a play-by-play guy and you're the analyst. I think, look, the deal he got is a tremendous deal when you think about it. He doesn't have to do all 17 games. He's doing 10. So he just got to pick the schedule, right? We all like that. I'll go here. I'll go here. I'm off that week. Can't do that. All right. So 10 out of 17. That's tremendous. Then he doesn't have to go anywhere. I mean, he's just zooming. The jazzed up Zoom that he's doing with his brother. So literally going 10 minutes instead of going maybe across the country, right? If game's in New York or New England, he's going across the country from Colorado. So I just think, and you nailed it. I mean, he likes everything perfect. So I just never lined up perfectly for him to do this. And so I think this one, I don't know if it lined up perfectly for him. It's just too good a deal. I mean, he's making, I don't know the numbers, but I guarantee you it's more than $10 million a year and probably much more. And so when you look at that, it's a production deal as well. And so when you look at that and the fact he doesn't have to travel and he only has to do, a little more than half the games, gosh, if you don't say yes to that, I don't know what you're going to say.
That's a sweet deal.
Yeah, it's a good deal. Yeah.
Mr. Marchand, who is the best duo calling NFL football games? You got Troy Aikman and Joe Buck for Fox.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could go a lot of different ways. I guess the issue for me is the combos, right? Like I'd say Romo's the best analyst. If you ask me the best play-by-play guys, I'd probably go Al, number one, and then Joe Buck, Iron Eagle, probably tied for second. Next tier is probably Nance Burkhart. Am I missing somebody? And then analyst wise after Romo, I like Aikman. Collinsworth is there. Greg Olson's coming. Charles Davis is very solid on that 2 crew with CBS. So that's probably where I'd go. So you said just the combo team. These are the team you'd want to listen to. I'm a little more partial to play-by-play. So maybe I go Al and Collinsworth still. But Romo's the best analyst. So look, I think there are a lot of good crews personally. I think sometimes when some of these guys are maligned, I get it. People have been doing games for a long time, but there's a skill level to do these games. It's not just anybody you could throw in those booths and do a good job.
Because you see last year, Tony Romo got that massive deal, biggest deal in, I guess, sports broadcasting, 17 plus. And I wonder how many of these guys moved the needle. Because on Sunday night, if it's Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson, I'm watching it no matter which channel. If CBS has the Super Bowl, I'm watching it. If it's Tony Romo calling a game or Tony the Tiger, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Tony the Tiger would be good. Roaring. What's he saying? That's great. Is that what he used to say? Yeah. Tony the Tiger? No, you're not wrong. Romo had his timing. I could go over 100 things. The timing, first off, he did really well and is good at it. But then his contract was up when the NFL deals are up. CBS had a Super Bowl coming up, so you want to have your booth right for the Super Bowl. There's gonna be 100 million people watching, so just the perfect timing. So the money he got was ridiculous, crazy, and I don't think we'll see it again. I mean, Peyton, his deal again, I don't know the exact details, but I'm sure it approaches that. He's only doing 10 games, and there's a production aspect to it. But yeah, but does he move the needle? Does he make more people watch? Not necessarily. Now, this ESPN broadcast, the Mannings did get nearly 2 million people this second broadcast.
Wow.
And the overall rating, went down. So people are watching. So, I mean, you could argue maybe they're getting their money's worth. And they're also, just the conversation has always been so negative about the Monday night booth. And so for them, it's important. It's helpful to have, Eli and Peyton in there.
I want to talk about something else you wrote on in August, that Barstool Sports is in negotiation to, I guess, broadcast some MLB games. Now, Mr. Marchand, my introduction about Barstool was about 2017 when they had a show on ESPN. It was canceled after one episode because of some
Yep.
backlash. You know, they believe Barstool was provocative and misogynistic. Fast forward to today that they're in negotiation with one of the biggest leagues in the country. Like, how do you receive that news? To go from being canceled in this, I guess, woke culture to now you might have MLB games.
Yeah, look, I think ultimately they're not going to get it probably. So,
Why
and,
not? Because
you know,
of their history?
yeah, I think largely because of the perception of and a lot of the reality. If you go and read some of the things, especially Dave Portnoy has said, and you know MLB, you know, I think ultimately is probably not gonna want to deal with the backlash of that. But that said, I think MLB would like to because Barstool does have a direct connection with 18 to 34-year-olds.
Yep.
And so, you know, you look at this package, it's non-exclusive games that ESPN used to have in the on Wednesday. So when you think about these, they're not really worth that much, right? Because we watch baseball more for our local teams that we root for,
Yes.
not nationally in the regular season and even a large part of the postseason. So these games don't really have value on linear TV anymore. So MLB is trying to find someone who will take them, and they've been struggling. So Barstool, I think, makes some sense for them. I think in what they would ideally like to do because they might be able to make it a little bit of an event on social, especially around gambling, as that becomes even bigger and bigger. But I don't think it will happen.
All right, I got two more for you, and I'll get you out of here. I am an adjunct professor at Farmingdale State. Last semester, one of my students came to me and they're like, "Professor, I'm a big-time hockey fan, and I'm disappointed that Turner just got broadcast rights for hockey." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because it's not really a traditional outlet. We don't know what Turner really knows about the sport." I said, "Hold on. Turner is responsible for the best basketball broadcast out there with Shaq and Charles and Kenny the Jet. So what is the chances, because Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey player, is a part of that broadcast, that Wayne Gretzky emerges as a media darling? Because some of the best players are not always the best analysts in the case of Magic Johnson.
Well, I think you're leading me, right? You're leading me what you're thinking. Yeah, you're right. Look, I don't know if Gretzky's going to be great. The key about all this stuff, it's like anybody in our jobs, right? If you have your job and your boss kind of asks you to do something that's stupid, right? And you don't do well, you're like, what? You know, of course I didn't do well. Everyone has their excuses, but when it's athletes or people on TV or other people are like, I don't want to hear excuses. So the point I'm getting to is if it's produced correctly, if you have Wayne Gretzky laughing and having fun, he doesn't have to be Charles Barkley. Somebody else, they've hired some provocative personalities who can maybe, you know, criticize and do that. But you need Wayne Gretzky adding some knowledge, breaking down some things, kind of doing what the Mannings are doing on their show. And it's, you know, because it's Turner, you're kind of, and I've compared it to Barkley, but it's just because of who he is.
Right.
I mean, he obviously as great as Barkley's top 50 all-time NBA player, one of the great players of all time, no doubt. Gretzky's Gretzky. I guess there could be arguments for who's the best player, but I think, you know, most people, it's kind of like Jordan. They go Gretzky number one. So just that, you get him laughing, explaining some things, you can have success. But that comes into the producing. You don't need Wayne Gretzky. He's already said he's not going to do it. You don't necessarily need him ripping people or being Barkley. He's not going to be Barkley.
Okay.
Nobody's Barkley. Barkley's the best. Barkley is the best. As great a basketball player as he was, he might be a better analyst. He's just entertaining, freewheeling. And you talked about Peyton earlier in terms of being a little bit tight. Barkley's the exact opposite. And I know him a little bit. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I know him well, but I've been in his presence a few times and know a lot of people who know him even better. He's just like that in real life.
Right.
He's a good guy. And that comes through on television where he just doesn't treat, you know, people by what their resume says or who they are. He just treats people the same, which is, as we get even closer digitally, the more and it's probably always been true, but the more real you are, authentic you are, the better the appeal just comes through. And when you're inauthentic, it just that's where you lose people.
Got you. Mr. Marchand, one last one. It's kind of like a two-part. One of my favorite personalities is Dan Le Batard. He recently left ESPN. Next thing you know, that was a $50 million deal. You know, back in the day when you left ESPN, you went somewhere for your career to die. I look at Pat McAfee, who seems to be just a guy with his friends and a microphone, and the world is at his fingertips. Like, what do you think the sports media landscape is going to look like in 20 years, especially as it pertains to mainstream media? And what advice would you offer to an individual like myself who would love to make a living in this business? Like, what should my focus be? Where should my goals be? Because maybe it's not the traditional route of going to ESPN.
Yeah. Well, first off, I should have said this earlier. Call me Andrew. All right. So that's number one, right? That's cool. But I appreciate the respect. But you can call me Andrew. And then
call you Clicker.
Yeah, Clicker. There you go. Yeah, you call me Clicker. There you go. That's what my friends call me. All right, so call me Clicker. So 20 years, that's a lot to ask for me. But I will say that the world's getting smaller, right? Mm-hmm. So it used to be someone like you need to be anointed by a newspaper, a radio station, a TV network. Someone had to say, you can do it, right? Mm-hmm. That you're the guy. Or you get in and then someone leaves, whatever. There's ways to do it. Now you can kind of do it yourself, right? You could have this podcast. It can become successful. Now people are going to want to do business with you and you can create something. And look, so that's one thing. The other aspect of it, and this gets into Le Batard and McAfee, is the gambling aspect. These media companies and gambling, everything's in the leagues. It's all coming together. Mm-hmm. This is all you can see it all. It's obvious how everything is merging together. So in 20 years, could I see someone like a DraftKings or a FanDuel or one of these places owning sports rights to games, right? Because then they could sell the gambling directly and own the games. Yeah, I think you could see that. But so that will change. I mean, the way media and like you can reach people like anybody. Like you can go independent. Now, obviously, that can be scary. It's probably easier just to be with a big company, and those companies aren't, I don't think, going anywhere. It's going to be, to predict 20 years is hard. Right. I'd love to be able to tell you exactly, but I do think the individual, like I guess that you go back and forth, right? There are less jobs in some regards, but I guess for personalities and information people, it's that niche, those niches are really where you want to be. Mm-hmm. The lane that I don't think is as valuable going forward in terms of mass. Now, will there be like one or two people who host these big shows? Yes. Right. But just in terms of mass, buying a Costco by the bundle, you're, in terms of being like a host and being very smooth, I don't know if that is where the money is in the future. I think the money is in personality and being able to say, look, this is the audience I can bring in. And that's where the real value is going to be. And they're going to need people like, I think the games too. I think the play-by-play analyst position or these alternative broadcasts as well, there is real value there as well, because there is again, we talked about it earlier. That's tangible, but there's an intangible enjoyment of games that come along with the broadcast being well done, which is important over time.
Mr. Andrew Marchand in the New York Post, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It was fun.
Yo, I almost botched that, man. I couldn't get my technology in order, man. Technical difficulties, man. I almost screwed that up. Thank you to the great Andrew Marchand of the New York Post. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience as we work through that. Ladies and gentlemen, when you want to read about sports media and some of the goings-ons, the contracts, the personnel moves, he is the source. Tapped in. I was critical of Peyton Manning, but I'm serious, man. I mean it. The rigid, controlling, conscious of your brand, that's not going to work in live TV. You got to be willing to be fearless. You got to be willing to be vulnerable. You got to be willing to make mistakes. You look at the start of Tony Romo's broadcasting career, it wasn't perfect. People were critical. He was receiving bow and arrows from everywhere. People didn't like the fact that he would tell us a play was about to happen before it happened. People didn't like that. But he didn't care. He was just like a kid in the booth making a mess. And what was the result? Highest paid person in that space. What is the result? One of the best. Well, in the case of what Mr. Andrew Marchand said, he considers him the best. So you got to be fearless. And I remember I go back to Peyton Manning's first play in the Super Bowl here in New York when it was the Broncos versus the Seahawks. It's the very first play. Right? You think about it. The Broncos had 2 weeks to prepare for the Seahawks. And on the very first play, Peyton Manning is calling audibles and pointing fingers. And what happens? The ball is hiked over his head for a safety. One play, the Broncos are down 2-0. Dog, sometimes just go and let things happen. You can't always configure it to the perfect measurement. What else did we discuss? First take. I'm serious. I think you got to put a white guy across from Stephen A. Smith. Like, that's the formula. You don't necessarily think race first, but when you're looking for certain differences, more times than not, it falls on the side of race. When you watch Pardon the Interruption, you hear Tony Kornheiser share things about his culture, and then Mike Wilbon share things about his culture. That's what makes it special. And I think that's how you get authentic debate. The key is in picking the personnel. So when you put Stephen A. up there with Keyshawn Johnson or Michael Irvin or Marcus Spears, I don't know if America's ready for that. What else did I have? Last piece. Dan Le Batard, my favorite talent in the world. I'm such a fan of Dan Le Batard that I don't listen to his show anymore. Now that I do a podcast, because he has the ability to shape my mind. You know, if I listen to his show and then I go try to do my own podcast, I'm going to be trying to sound like Dan Le Batard. So I don't listen to him anymore. And recently, Dan parted ways with ESPN. He continues to do his show via podcast. And he was out there on his own. And next thing you know, you hear he gets a $50 million deal. Pat McAfee is a media star. He was with Barstool. He left, started producing his own content. And now everybody wants a piece of him. I was reading something. It might have been Mr. Marchand. Pat McAfee was broadcasting out throughout I think it was the NFL draft. A sponsor saw what McAfee was doing, saw the audience he had. They called him on the spot and did a deal live. Traditional media can't compete with that. And the reason I bring up those two is because they are working on building leverage, and then the money will come. And not only does the money come, but since they have their own audience, they're able to retain control. You know, that was an issue with Dan Le Batard. He was being stifled by some of the executives at ESPN, but now in his own space, the gloves are off. And it goes back to a conversation I was having on one of my other podcasts when I said, I was disappointed that Kevin Durant and Draymond Green chose to run to Bleacher Report. Dog, it's a couch, a microphone, and a camera. You could do that anywhere. Build something of your own. Even when I look at All the Smoke podcasts with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, dog, it's a couch, a microphone, and a camera. Why you got to do it for Showtime? Build your own leverage. When Steven Jackson was supporting, I forget this dude's name, Deshaun Jackson. You know, there was some things about some anti-Semitic comments and Farrakhan. And Showtime came out and said, we're aware of Steven Jackson. I can't help but think the establishment applied pressure to Jack and made him retract or change his tune. Well, the corporations could do that to you when you don't have any leverage. When you choose to take their bag instead of building something of your own. I wonder if Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson even own the name All the Smoke. Can they take that with them? Pat McAfee, Dan Le Batard, them brothers are beasts on the independent route. All right. That's it, man. Thanks, y'all.